Buzz Daugherty turned an open pasture into a lush and peaceful garden that beckons you to stroll its pathways and make discoveries at every turn. From the multi-tiered waterfall to the miniature gardens that Susan creates, this rural hideaway is a beautiful experience on every scale.
When we first moved here, everything was pasture. We have about 2.5 acres under landscape. The property was fairly flat. I'd say we took some liberties with the ground to create more of what we wanted than what would have been just here if we'd have just used the flat landscape.
Buzz and I are totally different in the way we look at things. I see the big picture. I can see what it should look like eventually. Buzz can do anything that's possible to be building it. When we got the pergola, he built the model, and then he went and built the actual thing.
But underneath the pergola is the best spot in the garden to really get the sounds and the views. Some areas are raised and some areas are lowered, and there's some undulation in the topography. It enhances the view.
We've gone to a lot of botanical gardens around the United States, and we love the Asian ones. So we'll bring elements back, but not try to copy it.
We're not nearly as formal as most Japanese gardens are as far as keeping some of the trees pruned a certain way and into certain shapes and forms.
Right now, the fish swimming through the grass bed is my favorite, just because it's new and it was a lot of fun to create. And it is fish that are swimming in grass. But then, of course, to go along with that is a tree that Buzz cut down most of it, and then with leaves from home shows, we built a palm tree. We don't do anything invasive. If it's an invasive species, we won't plant it.
We started off wanting to have a conifer-based garden. We buy them as little sprigs and start them off in the greenhouse, and then when they get big enough, we move them up into the garden, see how they do.
And that worked well until we got too much shade in this garden. And then we've had problems with some of them drying out, others having to be moved somewhere else. We have a sink or swim attitude. If it dies, it dies. If something's struggling, I will take it out and take it to the greenhouse and then put it somewhere else. But if it dies, we have a great compost pile.
I think Susan managed to come up with a lot of good, different colors, different textures that have done fairly well here.
We do use as much color as possible. I almost always have a red and a yellow and a blue in every bed. I use it with conifers. We don't really have perennials. The only thing we have perennial-wise are hostas. You don't design the bed, you design the grass around it. The beds have not changed as far as shape, but what's gone into them has changed a lot when things have died or the trees have gone from full sun to full shade.
It's amazing that some of them that we have that are fairly good size now started out as small as they did.
And for at least 3 or 4 years, all it was getting the ponds together, getting the boulders around it. That's a 100-foot liner from the top to the bottom. So that was put in place, and then putting the rocks in it. And then the next step was putting the dirt around it so that you could actually furrow in the beds, and then putting the trees in. This place wasn't anything to look at for at least 12 years.
The pond is the main feature of our landscape. Everything kind of revolves around that. As we moved out and you get away from the pond, it became a little bit different type of landscape.
It's a moving, living thing. The waterfall itself, we don't do much with it. We'll get moss on it periodically. As far as the placement of the waterfall, that waterfall comes down the retaining wall of the existing property, so it has a 3 feet or 4 foot natural drop. But the stream itself That shifts quite a bit. We put the rocks in first, then we go back and move them to make the most noise.
The farmer who lived next door to us was kind enough to let us collect almost all the rocks that you see around the pond. And it takes several attempts to place the rocks where you think they should be. And when we finally get it right, then move on to the next rock.
We had feeder fish that we bought at one of the local stores. Unbeknownst to me, I thought they were all goldfish, and one of them turned out to be a koi. And he's very distinctive. He's not pretty, but he's at least 25 years old, and he has a black spot on his side, and he's completely white, but he's the original koi for us.
The size of your pond determines how many fish you can really keep, and we've pretty much established the size of their population.
Having a big pond has definitely helped in the cleanup of it and the funness of the fish.
For whatever reason, and we're not the cause of it, there are fish in the upper pond when there didn't start to be.
They went up through the filtration system. We can see them growing up there, and then there's 5 or 6 giant koi up there that we didn't put there.
Susan's miniature gardens are something that she's taken up in the last couple of years. The only thing that I do is construct the pots for her to put her gardens in.
One of the big problems with the miniatures is moving them. You have to have a large type of pot so that you can have a scene, but you don't want that much dirt. So what Buzz did is he took styrofoam blue board or insulation board, and he built a cross piece, and then he went up higher so that there's only 5 inches of dirt in those pots. You want to hamper the growth of all your miniatures. So when you don't let them have all that room for their roots, then you have the tree that you have that's 2 feet tall and has been there for 3 or 4 years. I used to use styrofoam peanuts. I didn't know they had gone to biodegradable peanuts. So the first 3 or 4 miniatures kind of shunk. Every time I watered, they just kept going down and down. So it finally dawned on us that, okay, these must not be working right. And it took us forever to figure out what was wrong with those. The last thing we had done before the miniature gardens is what we called the zoo. It's back on the other side of the property, and we had a tree that came down. It was a weeping willow, and it was huge. And I asked my husband, leave the trunk there. So it has about a 25-foot trunk, and we put a life-size lion in the top of the tree. And that led to other zoo animals, and now it was a joke to see how many different ones we can get in there and hide from people. There's a 6-foot-long panther that took my husband 6 weeks to find when we put that in the garden, because you didn't see it. It was well hidden. And now there's a lot of different fun stuff in there, and we have people coming back just to see what's in the zoo now. I walked the dogs at night. That was part of my job. So I would be out there at night with the flashlight, and I would be thinking, oh, this is what I should do here. That should go this way. So I would end up creating the actual beds and the structure of the bed in the middle of the night.
This is a garden that we have done completely on our own. Susan designed everything. We planted everything. We moved almost all the rocks ourselves. All the work is worth the effort when you get a chance to stand and look at it or share it with other people. It's also very exciting to see how everything grows. Can't believe how stuff grows.
It's a shame to not share it with somebody. No garden is ever finished. They're all changing. That's one thing about a garden. It's a living and breathing thing. It always changes. I think my favorite quote ever is to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow.
As we've seen, you don't have to have a large crew of landscapers to create an amazing and impressive landscape. For the novice gardener, move one rock at a time. Plant one tree, shrub, or flower, and before you know it, you'll have a backyard paradise all your own.